And welcome back to another episode of the Turn Up for What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. It's probably the longest, in fact, it is the longest time we've ever had between an episode since we kicked this off. But life starts to get in the way a little bit. But here we are with probably the most we've ever had to talk about. So we'll try and squeeze it in as best we can. And to do that, joins me, Mr. Brandon K. Scott. Brandon, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be back. Glad to be able to talk some free agency and Texans off season. It's been a whirlwind for us. It's interesting that
Yeah.
it be this long for you to have to go between episodes, where for us it's like it's been like nonstop. Even though not a lot has happened, it still feels like a lot has happened. Just because, like, I obviously know football,
Yeah.
but the signings and the moves have just been interesting to observe.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll try and work through it in a semi chronological order, and we'll see where we get to. But it's been a lot, and I think we've feels like we've come out of the darkness here a bit like Aaron Rodgers, and we'll awaken to see. And I'm probably like Rodgers. I've probably not made a decision yet, or finalised a decision on whether this team's definitely helped, but. There is no doubt, Brandon. I think just anecdotally before we kind of go into each guy in detail, I don't and I'm a big critic of Nick Caserio, probably bigger than most. But I admire the job that he's done. This, we've got to see where these guys play and what their output is on a Sunday. But I think for the first time in probably four, if not maybe five off seasons through the free agency period, this team has undoubtedly got better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's undoubtedly gotten better, and it's it's like position by position. I think if we were to break it down and to look at everything, you would say, hey, with almost every move, it's a value pick and it's an upgrade at the position that you're addressing. So I felt like, immediately. Well, I guess the first one was Robert Woods. Okay. So, and I thought about that. Like, it's just a good scheme fit, a good veteran to have in the locker room. We all probably knew at the time that Brandon Cooks was going to get traded as well. So he kind of replaces that role, but you figure you're going to do something else at wide receiver anyway. But then when they started getting those defensive tackles, right? When they get Hassan and Ridgeway and Sheldon Rankins, neither of which is going to be like a set the world on fire, super buzzworthy free agent signing. But when you talk about what the needs are and what the major holes, this is teams got needs and major holes to fill all across the board, or for the most part. But when we talk about the major ones, the biggest ones, you're talking about that defensive line, and having Sheldon Rankins and Hassan Ridgeway should make Texans fans feel a lot better than a rotation that includes something like Roy Lopez and Kurt Hinish and whatever they do when those guys aren't getting it done. Jaleel Johnson and the Vincent Taylor. Vincent Taylor was, it's like, okay, now you're talking about players that actually fit the scheme and fit the level of play that you're trying to accomplish. Not guys that are somewhat out kicking their coverage like a Roy Lopez and a late round draft pick and a Lopez and an undrafted free agent and Kurt Hinish in his rookie year playing as much as he did for you. So I think they immediately got better there, and I thought that was important. I thought the Jimmy Ward signing was pretty big, and I know pretty sure we'll get into these, but like just for the most part, it felt like everything that they did felt bigger than what they were. It didn't seem like they were just replacing guys, plug and play, losing a guy here, we're going to replace him. It felt like they made Nick Caserio specifically made conscious efforts to upgrade positions of weakness. And that's the part of it that's the plan. And that's not to say that they don't still have weaknesses, because they still do. And obviously there's a draft for that. And there's still an offseason to address for that. But I thought out of the gate, maybe I would have liked to have seen something bigger. Like you want to see something bigger. But Nick Caserio's talked before about hitting singles and doubles, just trying to get a couple of quality signings, and I thought he did that. You can gripe a little bit about, hey, where's the big major guy that they didn't get, and they didn't get like a big major signing, but that's not always what you're gunning for in free agency. And truth be told, the best players, the very best players that you're probably talking about, usually don't make free agency. They get extended, they get franchise tag, they get traded, and then they get extended or whatever the case may be. So for the quality of player that you're talking about in the free agency pool, I thought they've done a decent job.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, that's always the important facet to remember, or the consideration to remember, that all these guys, some of them, Sheldon Rank is maybe the most impactful potential player of this bunch. He's on his third team, so there's reasons why he's not hung around, and there's reasons why the Saints didn't sign him, part of their salary cap. Then he went to New York, and now he's here on a 1 year deal. I suppose on the 1 year deal or the short term deals, I don't necessarily have that much consideration or concern about the length of the deals, which has kind of drawn a bit of kind of ire or criticism from people. I don't necessarily have that much concern about the money because it's not mine. It's a franchise that makes plenty. I don't really care what we pay them if they work. But I think it's maybe the type of player that we've signed. I don't think we've necessarily signed a guy who's for whatever reason left his original team, maybe salary cap issues. And you're going to get the best of them. I don't think any of these guys fall in that category. So let's make that clear. I don't think they're going to step into the top two. They might, and I hope they do, but they don't. I think these are all kind of like, if there's the elite level, there's the quality starters. These guys are maybe sort of the third tier guys. But look, we didn't have any of those at all last year, apart from one or two, and a tackle maybe extended. So all these guys are improvements on what they had. But certainly they're not enough to bridge the gap. But that being said, Brandon, I think there's definitely a real consideration that things have got a lot better in terms of that. But what do you put that down to? Why are guys want to come here that are respectable now? What do you think the changes? What do you put that down to?
Well, I think there's a number of things that happened kind of all at once here. I mean, even before they hired Demeco Ryans, and I think that's what we're getting at here. But even before they hired Demeco Ryans as their head coach, it was always going to be the case that they'd have money to spend. That they would either have a bunch of money to throw at just a couple of guys, or like a little money to throw at a lot of guys. And it seems like that's what they've done, And Caserio's also talked about just being sure to have a good sense, like it's their job to have a good sense for what the market is and what players cost and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And, for the most part, it seems like they've done that, And so I think that it's the fact that they have the money to spend, and that helps. And also the Demeco Ryans factor of, hey, like he commands a certain level of respect, and I think people want to play for Demeco Ryans, but more so than just like the personal part about it, like just the production. Like they were good in San Francisco. He's proven to be a good coach early on, and from a system and like from a schematic standpoint, I should say, I think this is a scheme that players believe in, and that has become a lot more popular over the last, decade plus, however you want to look at it. The system, both offensively and defensively, I think players want to play here, or specifically here in this system. So the fact that they hired Demeco Ryans, who commands a level of respect in and of himself, along with the system that he runs on offense, the system that he's tied to, the system that he runs on defense, and the system that he's tied to on offense, and that he's brought here. And then on top of that, the fact that they had money to spend, it's just a kind of a perfect storm for them to be able to be able to acquire a higher level of free agent. And like you said, these aren't guys that are gonna like set the world on fire, but they're quality NFL players. And you could argue that at a lot of spots, they did not have quality NFL players playing last year. So that's what I would attribute it to: the timing of it, the money, and the coaching.
Yeah. And just going back on that point you said about Caserio, not necessarily spending on a big free agent. I don't know if he ever will, splash out in free agency, because if you look at the history of New England in free agency, obviously they had Randy Moss for a while, but he didn't break the market necessarily on the cost they got him for. The only really one of recent memory was probably Stephen Gilmore, when they went out and splashed out from a division rival to fill a position they really needed to on a championship roster. So if I was to guess, just everything you observe and the way he talks about fiscal responsibility and all that kind of stuff, the only time I could ever see Caserio doing that is if you've got a blatant hole that you can't fill, you've missed in the draft, you've missed in free agency, and there's one guy on the market and they go and make it happen. But beyond that, I always think this kind of approach this year, sort of second, third rate players, hoping you can get more out of them, will always be kind of his general philosophy, not to overspend, because we know free agency historically underdelivers versus the money you pay, because these guys are flawed. That's why somebody else hasn't paid them.
Yeah, right. Going back to the point I was making earlier about them being free agents for a reason, and I mean no disrespect, and they're quality players if they can catch on and get contracts, but they're free agents for a reason. And I think it's, for me, the biggest offseason move, and this is not even a take, like this is a fact. The biggest offseason move so far has been not, a non-free agent move. It's the Laramie Tunsil extension.
Yeah.
And I would say that there is not, I wonder if you agree with this. I don't think there's a free agent move that they could have made that would have been bigger than extending Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah.
I don't think so. It's, and that's not to say there's just not a player out there, but like scheme fit, like who's the player that they could have possibly signed that would have been as important as ensuring that you had Laramie Tunsil over the next 4 years? I don't know. And again, he's going to be on a contract for the next year, but I feel like that's the big move, even though it's not a free agent move. And going back to the point I was making, like the guys that are great, the guys that you really want to sign are the ones that you extend, the ones that you franchise tag and haggle with and try to extend, those are the guys, not the ones that you let go in free agency or that are available in free agency for you to go get. So again, for the quality of guy that's available in free agency, they've done a decent job.
Yeah, I think so. And let's take the Tunsil thing. That's how it came down last Sunday. And it was, I suppose it was something that you knew they wanted to do. Well, I think there was the rumours of they certainly were open to trading him. I think that's why the swirl of the potential link with KC before they signed Jawan Taylor, which I don't see that one working out based on all the games I've seen at Jawan Taylor play. So, but we'll see how they go. If any team can cope with it, it's them. But that was certainly something I think you came to a crossroads. It was either you extended him now or you had to trade him. I don't think the value wouldn't necessarily been there. The requisite value perhaps would have got back. If it had been an Orlando Brown trade or sort of that kind of value, you probably would have struggled to replace him. And I think based on all the moves you think they might make in the most important position in the game, then I think, given Tunsil, albeit it's a big jump again, it wasn't, because I think when you look at the market in terms of money, and look, as I said, I don't care about my money, but when you just look at it from a pure maths point of view, the Trent Williams only exceeded the total APY by a small amount, and they've gone from 22, 23 million to 25. So it's a clear reset. It's a clear show of faith for a guy who, bear in mind, played well last year, but the year prior there was big questions of him dogging it, and you and I talked about that. So, it's funny how, 2 years in football is a long time, but I think if he maintains the level of form, Laramie, that he did last year, and I think what was the big sort of step forward, if you like, and the thing that I remember from watching all the games back, well, I say watching all the games back, I think I gave up at halfway through the season watching a lot of the film back, but I think it was a much better move than giving, say, Mike McGlinchey $87.5 million a year. Was a big jump, probably the biggest overpay of free agency. So, when you look at it in that realms, if you had to fish in the market, this is a far better deal than what you would have done outside. So, it's not my money, so it's hard to get better. But if he maintains the level that he has done, I don't think anybody will have any complaints at 25 a year.
Yeah, and I don't know, like the only knock on him would be that 2021 year, and I think it's pretty clear that he made a business decision. And what's pretty transparent about him so far, and I was there for the extension press conference on whenever it was, Wednesday, earlier this week. I was there for that and got to talk to him and all of that. What's pretty clear about Laramie Tunsil is that he is a motivated businessman. Yeah. And I don't so much care what a guy is motivated by, just so long as they are motivated. And he's motivated. The same thing that makes him tick may not be the same thing that makes everyone else tick. Like, he may not sound like the same type of competitor, talks about money a lot and resetting the market and building business teams and being a business leader and all this kind of stuff. But being an elite left tackle is his avenue and his way to doing that, to accomplishing that and achieving that. And he takes that very seriously, and he's very good at what he does. And again, that 2021 year gets hurt, is able to come back, but in his mind, come back for what? To do, to do what? We're not a competitive team, and I am a business entity in his mind. Like that's his prerogative, and I can't, like, you don't love that from a, hey, I'm rooting for this team and all of that, but you gotta kind of understand it. If he feels like, hey, it's not worth it to go out there and play fresh off of this injury or whatever it is, and maybe wait until I'm fully healthy and have a chance to perform at a certain level and make myself some more money, you got to understand that, even if you don't like it. And so I do. And I think that when he's out there, if he's healthy, he's going to play very well. And the concern, I think, for fans is that if he's not healthy, that he's going to make business decisions. I think that's a thing. That is something that perhaps Texans fans are going to have to reconcile with, that, he may play through some injuries. He may not play through others. That might be the reality. And I'm not speaking for him. I'm just saying that seems to be what we're looking at here. Okay. And so you just hope that he stays healthy. And because when he is healthy, he's really good. And you kind of go from there. He's worth the money. If you're going to pay a left tackle, there, that kind of money, there's about a handful of them that are worth it. Maybe three to five of them that are worth it. He's one of them. And so there you go. He's worth the money. So you pay it. And again, like you said, there is not I've always said, I didn't feel like you need necessarily a left tackle that's as good as Laramie Tunsil. But if you got one, you might as well pay what it costs, Like if I were to go back 3 years, 4 years now and redo it, I would have been just fine with letting Titus Howard figure it out at left tackle, and maybe he not be very good as a rookie, but see it through and not trading for Laramie Tunsil. But you did it, and he's fulfilled. He's lived up to the expectations. So go ahead and go with it. Go ahead and go with it now. It makes all the sense in the world. And so I think it's going to be a good thing. And no matter which quarterback they draft, that quarterback's going to benefit from having Laramie Tunsil there for the duration of their rookie contract.
Yeah, and I think what you've seen there is he's kind of almost, I think, in some ways that kind of set a trend, 2 first and second, because you saw a number of guys, Jamal Adams, you got the cornerback from Jacksonville, Ramsey, go across to LA, and then there's been a number of kind of big, obviously then the Matthew Stafford trade as well. So like they kind of set a trend in that sense, and I think he's also kind of set a trend in his own way. By doing short deals, because I think the 4-year deal has now become the 3-year deal in the league, and I think there is a genuine trend to less committed deals. And I think part of that, agents and players aren't willing to sign up for the back end of the contract, which is paper dollars. Because if you think it like that, if you look at the John Taylor deal, that's only a 3-year 60 rather than the 80 that's kind of pointed out. The Orlando Brown deal is only like a 2-year 42. So like it's great money if you can earn it, but I think it's I think the way in which deals are structured, there's less years, more guarantees over a short period of time, and I think the length on the cycle of players and the players' deals and what agents are willing to commit to is short. And so I think he's almost kind of set, been a bit of a trailblazer in some sense, and I think it was quite good and refreshing. I think we're all needing him, me more than most. I think probably needs a refresher of some kind of positive outlook. And he said, look, I want to be here. I've treated this as a business. I've exceeded expectations. The first tackle, I believe, I don't know if this is actually true, but based on his comments, to reset the market twice. So look, I think it's a good position to be in, to have a player at a premium position that wants to be here, that's committed, that's signed, and could potentially help you win games. Now, I would rather spend that money on an edge rusher.
To be clear, though, he's the first one to do it because he signed such a short deal. Going back to your earlier point, he's the first to do it because of the new trend. I just wanted to point that out. So that's why.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this was probably a better or easier negotiation for him or the last negotiation was easy, and now he's kind of set that. And once you do it once, once you give away that value, once you set a precedent, then it's very, very hard to buck that trend. So here it is, and I think he did that with the full knowledge that before I think he'll be 31 or something by the time this next one ends up expiring.
Yeah,
So
30 or 31, one of those.
yeah. So he's gonna get paid again.
Yeah.
So whether it's here or not, I don't know. Texans will have to be willing to do the same again in theory, unless the play kind of and the quality on the field kind of drops off. But yeah, hats off to him. He seems motivated. He seems welcome. He welcome it. The mysterious figure of Saint Omni is probably is something that's drawn a lot of attention. Not an official NFL. Or NFLPA registered agent by the looks of it, so people are a little bit uneasy because again, this is more against the grain and against the system sort of stuff. But that just sums up Laramie, and I think long as he continues the level of play they did last year, then I'll not have any complaints, Brandon.
Yeah, same here. I think most people feel the same way. It is interesting that the feeling and idea on him would change so quickly, or I guess how much time actually passes over a year. Because the whole reason why I advocated for trading him is because I just assumed that he didn't want to play here, and I kind of understood it. Would have understood it if that was the case. So I thought, well, what are you doing with Laramie Tunsil? I mean, he doesn't want to play here anymore. Why would he want to play here anymore? When they traded for him, they were good, and then suddenly they became bad, and but he's motivated by other things, money, lifestyle, and would like to compete within that framework, the money and lifestyle that he likes, and the Texans were in a position to pay him. Houston is a place that he likes to be. And so hopefully somewhere within that, they can find some type of, competitive prowess, like they've been bad for 3 of the 4 seasons he's been here. Right. So, hopefully that's something that's going to change soon. But yeah, no, the thing with him and the market though is really interesting because like you said before, he's going to be able to get to do this maybe again at 30, so he's talking about bragging about doing it for a second time. I wonder what it's going to look like that third time, and especially if they're good by then. I mentioned that point about it lining up. I mean, think about it. It lines up perfectly with the rookie contract. So you're setting up the rookie quarterback to have a Pro Bowl, probably all pro level left tackle. He hasn't made an all pro yet, but he's that level left tackle with him for the duration of his rookie contract. And then by the end of it, see where you're at. What it also does, I was going to mention, is make the domino effect of the Texans' business decisions on the offensive line really interesting. Just what they've done, because they're going to have the next decision is going to be on Titus Howard. Okay. So like you're going to fully invest, it's a domino effect on the full investment on the offensive line, starting with last year with the drafting of Kenyon Green, and then now the extension of Laramie Tunsil. Of course, they, exercised the 5th-year option on Titus Howard. What are they going to do after that? Clearly saw a need and a reason to address right guard by letting go of AJ Cann and trading for Shaq Mason, right? And so, and obviously we feel like center is something that is an open question still. I know they signed a backup from Miami who's probably, I guess, a scheme fit, but more of a depth piece, I'd imagine, somebody that could probably play for them if they need him to. But I'd like to see how they're going to form the entire thing now that they've locked up Laramie Tunsil and they've got a clear decision to make on Titus Howard.
Yeah, I don't know if they can pay Titus or they will do, or well, they can. There's always a way you can just convert stuff to signing bonus if you're always spending cash and you keep kicking the can down the road. But then if you look at somebody like Andre Dillard, who ironically Titus came out of the draft with, not really played, been at all accounts for where he was picked to bust. And he signed a 3-year, well, it's $329, but I think in essence it's a 2-year, $17 million deal. So on that basis, Titus is going to want above that. So
if I'm Titus, I'm looking at what Jawan Taylor just did, and I'm like, hey, somebody make me there, convert me from right tackle to left tackle as a free agent and pay me a load of money. Yeah, well, that's what I'd be trying to do if I were him. I'm just speaking from disrespect from a Texan standpoint of
Hmm.
probably wanting him, but yeah, you're probably right. He's probably gonna outprice himself for the Texans market more than likely,
Well, I
unless
think
everything's
so.
only up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if you're his agent, you're watching those numbers come in, you think, well, okay, could he maybe get 15, 16, 17? Could you commit that amount of money on a rookie deal? You probably can. But I suppose he's not really proven it. And I think it's a supply and demand thing. That's why John Taylor gets, that was the next best available option, which isn't all that great, but that's where they got. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out, Brandon, in terms of that. And I think that kind of rounds us off really on Tunsil. But that Sunday, at the same time, the news came, which is not so good. And I think there's probably not too much point comment on it too much in depth. But the Brandon Cooks trade, everybody's expecting it. It's a bit of a fuck up. You could have got more at the deadline. We don't know exactly how much. Caserio was very kind of clear with Seth and Sean in the morning show when he did that interview that it was misreported. And look, a second seemed high. Like don't get me wrong. I don't think Hopkins will get a second when he gets traded from Arizona this year, whatever that ends up being. That's what we got for him at the time, right enough. So it's below that. So it was maybe going to be like what they gave up for Demarius Thomas that year. Under Brian Gaynor, it was a third, the run maybe, but that was a guy that was at that time that was a third on a guy's contract expired at the end of the season, and then you've got to give up some for Hopkins. You've got years left, but he's going to want a new deal and probably get close to, if not reset the market at that position. So I don't see how you can give up more than a fourth or a third for him. So to think that was going to be a second was perhaps extreme. But this isn't great value, and considering the dead cap hit you take, that's a big chunk of change you're taking there of his salary that he just fucking signed last year, which is the worst part about it. But we've been probably over this already. But I think, however you look back on it, from signing him to Easterby leaving, to then turning his back on the club, to kind of playing, to then knocking you off the top draft spot with his performance in week 18. To then getting traded for a paltry return. The Brandon Cooks trade, I think, for a second shelled out, and a contract that he didn't ever really play on. In fact, didn't play on. Not the finest move or history for a player that'll ever be recorded, I don't think, Brandon.
Man, I don't think I could say it any better than you did. You said it like to a T. Basically, my view on it is, there's no angle that you could take on the Brandon Cooks signing / trade. So just call it the last year of Brandon Cooks. There's no angle that you can take from it and say that it was positive, that it was a good thing. Except for Brandon Cooks, obviously, because he got paid, and he ultimately is going to end up on a team that's more than likely going to be better than the one that he was on the year before and the years before, with the Cowboys. So he ultimately benefits from it, but from a Texan standpoint, and best wishes to him, man, honestly, because we honestly didn't have a lot of issue with Brandon Cooks, and I still don't. I think the Brandon Cooks issue is really a Nick Caserio issue. He didn't have to pay him all that money. You should have traded him at the trade deadline. And obviously, it's like an extra kick to the junk that you're going to have to pay a portion of the salary on the back end of it when you could have gotten rid of him. And do you feel like they would have had to pay his salary if they had traded him at the deadline? I don't. And maybe they would have, but what you can't convince me of, what you absolutely can, and I know the salary was a big part of the issue of trading him. I understand that, but what you can't convince me of is that a team, and we know that the team that we're talking about here is the Cowboys, but whichever team, any team that is interested in Brandon Cooks would not be more desperate to get him at the trade deadline when they're trying to make a push. They would in the offseason when there's a lot more clarity and planning that goes on into your team building process. You're trying to make quick moves there at the deadline to make your team better. And I feel like you'll do a little bit more to get this. And so I'll always have a tough time, without knowing for sure, I'll always have a tough time believing that they could not have gotten something better than what they ended up getting. And I'm pretty sure we've heard information out there that, it could be a third or a fourth. I know Nick Caserio says a lot of these people don't know what they're talking about, but a fifth and a sixth after he played for you post trade deadline for nothing, the idea that he would be out there helping you win games, helping you win a game that was in your better interest to lose. the fact that you had him out there risking injury, knowing that you were probably going to trade him anyway. Like, there's just no logical reason for Brandon Cooks to have been on the team after the trade deadline. Whether that meant trading him, not trading him, and sitting him, like they did with Deshaun Watson the year before. Like, there was just no reason for him to be out there for that latter part of the season. With respect to him as a player, I get it, but like it's counterintuitive at this point. He doesn't want to be here, and his existence on the team might put you in a position to be somewhere that you don't want to be, which is a little bit better than you're supposed to be, at that point in the season. So I just think from any point of logic, it did not make sense. And if you want to just keep it straight down to the trade, like bare bones, what you get back in the trade, you cannot convince me that you could not have gotten more for Brandon Cooks at the trade deadline than you did at the end. And then that's before you get to the time wasted with him on the field.
Yeah.
So from any angle, you called it a fuck up. From any angle, that's exactly what it is.
Well, you just don't have that dynamic of like, you either pay this now or you don't get this player for your championship run or your perceived championship run. It's wide open. Everybody's spending money in free agency. People are looking towards the draft. This ain't a great draft for wide receivers, but
if you pay a guy $36 million guaranteed and in less than a year he's asking to be traded, that's a failure.
Yeah.
Just like the Deshaun Watson thing. They paid that guy all that money, signed him that contract, and he didn't even wait till that bad boy kicked in, and so that's a failure. Sorry.
Oh no, and I think with the token of, and this is where it becomes, and this is where my criticism comes into Caserio at times, and I said we wouldn't dive into this, but here we go, I can't help myself. When you don't want to spend money in free agency, when you let guys like, I'm not going to pronounce his name, but the edge rusher that went across, the linebacker that went to Tennessee, what was his name?
I thought you were talking about Obo Okoronkwo.
Oh, we'll come back to him because there's a couple of guys that have all been paid and they didn't play very well here, so I'm interested in that too. But I think when you're not willing to spend money in free agency, and I wouldn't have given Obo money, by the way. I can't believe he got that deal because he couldn't even play the fucking run last year, week one. He was a liability. So to go from liability to $33 million within a year with only playing well in a small stretch of games on a team who were out of the game at that point. And anyway, I think that's fool's goal, but good on him. Go, fill your boots, son. Well done to you. Coming back hometown and getting paid. So, but when you're not willing to pay money in free agency, but then you're willing to fucking put money in, you may as well put it in a bag and burn it, Nick. That the money that you gave Brandon Cooks, that you now can't spend on actual good players that are going to be here. You've created additional dead cap that you never had to. If you ever thought that there was and look, maybe Cooks has deceived them because, let's be honest, he's learned from the best and under old Pastor Jack, right? So he's, a guy who was never qualified managed to get to the top of a tree of $1 billion organization. Never forget that happened to us, and it still has, because we've lost a 5th round pick because of the guy. But I think, in a sense, if you think players aren't happy, you don't pay them, but the problem is, I think one day Cooks is coming out to me going, I've said I'll never be traded ever again. I'm not willing to do that. I don't want to be here. You're messing with my career. I'm going to let all the lies come out, all this sort of stuff. So I'm kind of glad to see the back of all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was misguided to give him the extension when you did. For whatever reason. If you didn't think Jack was going to be around here, if you thought Lovie Smith was going to tolerate Jack Easterby, and that dynamic might then, that was never going to happen either. So
how about the fact that they needed to upgrade at the position anyway?
Well, that's it. You've now made a weakness probably the worst spot on your whole roster.
Yeah, I mean, why pay that amount of money when part of your issue with your weapons is the fact that he's your best receiver to begin with? Like, you should be looking to, like, if you're going to keep him around, you need to keep him around at a much more reasonable number, or be looking to move on. If he feels like he needs to be paid what he was paid, like, if you're going to be paying that kind of money to a wide receiver, it needs to be somebody who's honestly younger and better than Brandon Cooks.
Yeah.
So and that's the fact of the matter.
And the fact it's a 2-year deal. Like, when you're not going to win games and you don't want to win games, why are you paying money for people and we've seen this a lot, like at the end of their career, patchwork jobs, like that are second-rate player or third-rate players. He's a 2B at best. He's a great complement to other skill sets. Absolutely. And he might
Well,
do quite well in Dallas.
Soda was on leadership though, which is the
Yeah,
ironic part. Like
yeah, yeah,
this is the culture guy,
yeah.
and so even though we're not going to be competitive, like you're saying, we're not going to be competitive in these years. But what we are going to do is pay our leader, establish a culture, and by the time we are competitive, there'll be some value in that. But that guy shot to hell too, because just a few weeks into it, oh, surprise, we aren't very good. I want to go. Okay, well, that was what they paid the money for.
Everybody knew it, Brandon. Everybody knew it.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's gone. So be it. And I think free agency was kind of ticking along really kind of slowly. I suppose one thing I would have said that perhaps, I don't know. I think it looked very similar to last year after the first week. I think, but the Shaq Mason trade aside, I think that's probably, it could be, and I hope it is, Caserio's best trade. I don't think he's very good at negotiating. I don't think he's very good at trades. But I think what he got for Shaq Mason, hopefully, I think's got the potential to be better than Marcus Cannon, better than Shaq Lawson, all this kind of stuff. So I think he's a guy who's proven it out with New England. Yeah. And I think that's the key for me. Sorry, what was that, Brian?
I was saying better than AJ Cann.
Better than AJ Cann. Yeah, and I think, AJ Cann was... Yeah, I thought he wasn't the worst last year by any stretch. And you're only as good as the man next to you, so I don't blame all his performances on it. But I think when you think of material upgrades, Shaq Mason is a material upgrade on AJ Cann. And whoever the hell we've trotted out the last couple of years at that spot too.
Yeah, AJ Cann was fine. He just didn't move very well. No, that was kind of the issue. Like, I just didn't think he moved as well as he needed to. And every now and then, he was... he was a highlight film like the like Kenyon Green was every now and then. But he was fine. But to me, it was clear that they needed to do something different. If Kenyon Green wasn't a rookie and wasn't so young, they obviously, I think, would have done something different. They're just going to see that through and hope that he develops over the course of the offseason and over the course of his career and everything. Give him a chance. He's a real young player. But no, I thought the Shaq this Shaq Mason trade is probably going to be a little bit underrated because you don't think much about right guard, but if we're talking about running a difference, like they had to come in and say, okay, AJ Cann was fine last year in Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton's system.
Yeah.
Can AJ Cann come in here and zone block for us?
Yeah. Well, no, because you couldn't move. So, like you said, there's no way he's gonna beat a linebacker to the corner to stretch it, to stretch his zone play or something like that. So
yeah. So what I was saying earlier about the scheme fits, it's what I like most about the offseason. What they've done so far with the free agency, and so you think back to the combine, right? And I know there's a lot of conversation now about, at least over here, I don't know how much of it you've heard, but a lot of discussion about how many representatives.
I saw a bit of that.
Yeah, my God, do we have to?
Well, do you know, if Cal turned up at somebody's pro day, I'd be fucking petrified. Do you know? I really would. So, I think
I actually hadn't thought about that even.
Yeah. Imagine him and Hannah, staring down.
Hannah would be great. Cal would be interesting. I mean, they would be fun. They're in practice a lot, but
no, I know. I just think it's like that movie Drafty, isn't it? When the owner goes and tells him to go and select the guy, and he doesn't, and then he mysteriously flies back and what have you. But I think I'd be worried about that. But I have seen that, and it's ludicrous.
Do you remember what Caserio said that the coaches were doing though at the combine when he said
putting the scheme in, and that's the most important thing.
And they were looking at trying to help them match free agents with scheme. They obviously weren't going to be signing free agents, but they were scheming and they were looking at players that they liked,
could help,
they thought would fit what they were scheming, and this is the fruit of that. I feel like. Absolutely.
So I think you had the MJ Stewart extension, which he's a solid tackler. I thought it was a little bit of an overpay. Tavir Thomas coming back, I think it was a reasonable deal, I suppose, for a guy who's playing nickel. But when you had day one of fucking Mike Boone, Noah Brown, Andrew Beck, and Case Keenum. I was like, oh, here we go again. But it has turned. But like, I do appreciate Case Keenum, and I suppose the most notable one. Well, maybe Andrew Beck as a fullback, sort of. What was his name under Coombs? And he was great. There was Joel Dreesen, and there was the guy who Casey. No, Casey. Yeah, yeah.
The one that was from, I think he went to Rice.
Yeah. I think yeah. Did he? Oh no, you need to Google it.
James Casey, baby.
James Casey, yeah. And do you remember in the New England game he dropped after Manning returned the kickoff or the punt return, and then I'm sure it was him, and he was wide open, and he dropped it in the end zone, and we would have gone 7-0 up straight away in that game, in that playoff game against New England. But anyway, he was a great player. He was a utility weapon that they used. So Troy Harrison might be out a gig if this guy's any good or what they want him to be. But
probably he probably is. It looks like he probably is.
And so this guy might be quite good, and he might give you a functional offense. So, and it was the offense we all reminisce to. So he might be interesting. Noah Brown, okay, we'll see. I think, but again, is he better than Chris Moore? Probably. So, I think, we're starting to see small improvements.
I would lean closer to maybe.
Well, I do like Chris Moore. He's like the kind of guy that always exceeds expectations, isn't it?
Yeah, like year. he you know what? I'll say this. Hopefully, and he's gonna fill that Chris Moore role. Like they're the same style. I feel like they're the same style player and receiver. Who can do multiple things.
I think he can probably block a bit better as well, so he gives you that more running because they're going to really rely on the run. So this year, yeah, he's a bigger frame guy. So Mike Boone, I don't know why besides I assume special teams, but I don't know. I've not cared enough. But I think the one thing was, and strap yourself in if this is news to you, Case Keenum most likely represents the end of Mr. Davis Mills.
Yeah, I feel like that could be the case. Even though I wouldn't be opposed to having three quarterbacks
through camp,
but Davis can't be the third quarterback, and Case isn't going to be the third quarterback, and they're not going to cut Case, like they signed him for a reason. So it very well could be. I would not be surprised if Davis wants to be traded. I don't know what that looks like from the team standpoint. I don't know where they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if Davis looks at it like, just trade me for whatever you can get. But it will be interesting to see how the Davis situation plays out. Like, because I don't think he's going to be on the team. But does that mean whether that means he gets cut or released, or they are able to trade him? I think it's something to watch out for because I don't have a good sense for it just yet.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one of those ones where it was. There'll be some value there because teams will put, it's maybe a trade, a roster cut down guy might be one of those where you get a 6 or something so a team can secure him rather than trying to get him on waivers maybe or something. I don't know, but you never know. You might be surprised. You might get a 5th or something. So
we'll see. It could probably. I made it seem like it's going to be this big suspenseful thing, but it could honestly go either way. And it would be honestly. It won't be a big deal either way. You know what I mean? Like they'll just because by then, like right now it feels like it, and it's worth talking about. But by the time they draft a quarterback, like once this thing gets resolved, they will draft a quarterback replacement, and it's like who?
I saw a video the other day, one of these like notorious idiots on Twitter, and it said the Texans don't need to draft a quarterback at 1, and the first play selected was a flea flicker. And I just thought, well, if you can't see the irony in that, then good luck to you. But anyway, I think that'll end, and I think we'll all move on. So I think there was that tier, and then early in the tier, how you doing for time, Brandon? I didn't ask you that at the start. You're all good. So the first tier was Jimmy, or the sort of first tier that came in that wave, if you like, was Jimmy Ward, Chase Vinovich, and Hassan Ridgeway. All players I've heard of. I didn't have to Google these guys this year, so that felt like a step forward. And I said, okay, yeah, I've heard that guy. I remember seeing that guy play. So of those three, Brandon, is there anyone in that sort of tier that you think is going to make the most impact?
Well, first of all, I want to say that those players, the fact that they signed those players is the reason why I didn't mind the Mike Boones and some of any of the stuff that I was like, huh? I was like, okay, and even Case, maybe even because of what I felt like it probably signaled for Davis, and just mean that they were going to more so than Davis. I don't want to make it about him, but the number 2 overall pick. It's like, hey, they're investing in backup quarterback. They seemingly already have one in Davis, but now they're getting a different one. And so they're obviously going to go, instead of like signing Jimmy Garoppolo, they're going to go and draft a quarterback like everybody wants them to do. So that was kind of the underlying message for me when that happened. It made me feel good. To your question about those three players, though, I like them all, and I'm gonna single out Jimmy Ward and Hassan Ridgeway for different reasons. Jimmy Ward, I think that's probably going to be the answer to your question for me, because I think he just brings an attitude and this sort of mentality to the team that I'm not going to say they were lacking, but they just desperately need a lot more of. I feel like they need a lot more guys who are just tough and physical, and so too many times out there you look around and you feel like they're getting pushed around. You prefer, like, you don't think of, hey, I want my safety necessarily to be the epitome of that, but it helps to have as many guys like that as possible. So if it's a safety, I'll take it, and I think he brings that sort of attitude. I don't know, like, I think it's fair to wonder how long or like how good is he going to be in year 10.
Well, that's it. He's 31 now.
Yeah, that's probably my main concern and question. But there's no reason right now to kind of be at least optimistic about it, since you're talking about last year, a guy who played well and moved from safety to nickel and did it admirably. If a guy can move from safety to nickel one year, you feel like he can move back from nickel to safety, a year older. So I feel okay about it, even though it is a question. It's probably the one that I like the most. But Hassan Ridgeway too, though. Like, even though we're talking about a rotational guy, not a star in any sense of the imagination, but a quality NFL player. Like, he was, for a rotational guy, he was among their better interior linemen, like for a rotational guy. And they were just good all across the board. They didn't have many weaknesses, but he's a part of that. So I'm like, okay, again, not a signing that's just going to like set the world on fire and make you think, oh man, that'll fix everything. But then you pair that eventually, and I know we're going in sequence here, but you pair that eventually with Sheldon Rankins, and you're like, okay, now they've got interior linemen that include Malik Collins, Sheldon Rankins, and Hassan Ridgeway, which looks a lot different, like I was saying earlier, than Malik Collins, Roy Lopez, and Kurt Hinish.
And like, I think
so those are the ones I like a lot.
Yeah, and like Kurt Hinish or Roy Lopez might make the roster this year. I'm probably not both of them, all being said. But then when you're only asking 15 snaps or so out of those guys, then their play becomes better as well. So I think you're probably going to get better quality out of them, and then you might see some of the flashes that we saw in year one of Lopez, rather than the exhausted Lopez being out there, 50-60% of the plays, which is too much for a guy that size. And I think, look, Jimmy Ward will be 32 by the time the season starts. I think we've got to remember that the legs go pretty quickly as a safety. Just in the same way, I'd be very cautious of paying Steven Nelson, because corner's a year-to-year thing. I always remember, and the best example, Brandon, I go back to my head when I think about cornerback play, A.J. Boye looked unbelievable when he was here. He got a couple of good years out of him when he got the big deal. And then all of a sudden, he's traded to Carolina. Doesn't look the same player all of a sudden. So, when it goes at that position, because you have to cover so much space in the backfield when that natural raw athleticism's cut into, you're no longer as effective as you can be. But what I think he will do is he'll help be a coach on the field from Demeco and do all that kind of stuff. So, to be a coach on the field, you might not get the full 2 years out of him, but he's been given, what was it, $8.5 million up front. So that's why he's here, because you paid him a big signing bonus for a 2 year deal.
You're asking him to play safety alongside a guy that you believe more so in Jalen Petrie.
Yeah,
like, you feel like that's more of the up and
that could be his biggest departure gift. When we signed Will Fork, and I fully believe DJ Reader's only the player he is because he played with Vince Wilfork. So if we can have a similar kind of effect, then I'm all for it at that spot.
I didn't think about it like that either. That's a good point. That's a because I was thinking about it more so of, hey, well, you're relying on kind of Petrie to be more of the playmaker type, but also you're not gonna feel like you need, if you're bringing Tavierre Thomas back and you still got Desmond King, you don't feel like you're gonna put him in the slot either. you
Yeah,
know, unless in a pinch, you know what I mean? So like
yeah,
you feel like you're putting him in the best situation to succeed, but you make a good point on the effect that he can have on others. You know,
yeah,
Laramie Tunsil was just talking about that on saying, "Hey, I want to be a guy, a vessel to the Jalen Petries and Damian Pierces and Kenyon Greens of the world, and Titus Howards of the world, and everybody who's younger than him."
yeah,
And Jimmy Ward is a very, very good example of somebody that could be that, somebody that they can learn from. So, and especially like you said, being a coach on the field, teaching the scheme, helping teach the scheme. I mean, I think that's going to be super valuable. You know, you talk about them not, you know, they hadn't, and I know they've signed linebackers now, and we'll talk about it, but you know, at that point, you know, it was like, you know, feeling was, hey man, they're going to have to get a real middle linebacker, but getting Jimmy Ward in terms of a guy that can be someone that can tell you about the defense and is super experienced in what they did or what they did in San Francisco, I think is valuable.
yeah. And I don't I don't think Ed Reed was that much older than 32 by the time the season starts when we sign him. A couple of years
Yeah,
maybe, but
yeah,
so I
yeah,
think
yeah. Yeah.
you've got to be
You hope he
careful.
doesn't dog it like that.
Well, that's it. Yeah, he quit before he even joined. I think he only yeah, I think there was a couple of
Yeah,
solitary
I hope they
performances,
check
and that
his.
was it.
I hope they checked his hip. I hope they checked Jimmy Ward's
Yeah,
hip
yeah.
for that cheap catches.
Exactly. So no, I think I think Chase Vinovich, he didn't make it in New England for whatever reason, so I don't expect much out of him. But but all three of those guys all on their third team, so it is what it is. But I think having those positions, and I think when you see Jimmy Ward coming in to play safety, hopefully. But I tell you what, this is one hell of a safety class in the draft this year. So I think from everything I've read, and I'm nowhere in depth this year in the drafts I was last year. Not even 1% is what I did last year. But there's definitely more players you could bring in that he could coach up, and you could get a safety tandem, sort your defense out pretty quickly. But I think of the first wave before the Cooks Tunsil extension Sunday, that first week, Sheldon Rankins, I think for me was probably the best player
Mm.
that we signed, and I think because this defense relies on pressure up the gut, and you have to be able to get that so you can so so they keep the quarterback in the pocket and collapse the pocket. And I think I know it's the hardest thing to play against. It can kill a play in a second if you can get somebody that can beat their lineman off the snap. I think he's got you've seen him win sacks with spin moves, great first step, great hands, great upper body control to try and shorten his length to the quarterback. And I think, Brandon, for me, Sheldon Rankins is potentially the best sign now. It's a reasonable investment. 1 year, what was it, almost 10 million, 8.5 guaranteed as well. So they've paid a bit of money out here to get these guys in. We've obviously seen one guy go out in Okoronkwo on a 1 year, which I kind of think's, yeah, it's a shame we've spent so much money because that'd be great to get a comp pick back for a guy like that. But I think Rankins, to stay on topic, is the best signing of that first wave, I think, and potentially your most impactful signing that you've made in free agency.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I like the collection of it all, but as a singular player, yeah, Rankins is the best one.
Yeah.
That I felt like the Rankins one was the one where I felt like they were for real. And when I say they, I mean Nick Caserio and the approach of free agency for real in making this team better. And when I really started to turn my nose up against the idea that they weren't signing quality enough players, I'm like, okay, between like start with Robert Woods and come all the way down to what they've done in between here to Sheldon Rankins, just here to where we are right now. And for the most part, they've either added depth or they have upgraded, I think, at the positions that they addressed.
Yeah.
And none more so. Not only I feel like not only is he the best player of that bunch, but I feel like he might even be, if I think about all of the positions that they've upgraded so far, he's probably like just put him next to Roy Lopez. He's probably the biggest upgrade, of anything
Yeah.
that they've done. Like the difference from Jimmy Ward and Jonathan Owens and or MJ Stewart or whoever, Eric Murray, whoever else they had out there playing safety at a given moment. I don't think it's going to be as significant as the difference between Sheldon Rankins and what at
Yeah.
least what you got from Roy Lopez last year. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and you think like Jimmy Ward's, better than I've forgotten his name now. The one that's married to the
Yeah, Jonathan
former
Owens. Jonathan Owens. Yeah.
Jonathan Owens. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that was pretty much where you were. So is he better than that? Yeah. Is Chase Vinovich probably going to be better than a 32-year-old Mario Addison? Absolutely. And I think when you think of that lineup of the front four, and I hope we add to it in the draft, and they will have to. I think there's no doubt
Yeah.
about it. Particularly edge, because edge is probably obviously quarterback, wide receiver, and then edge. I think is a really tertiary spot in terms of your need hierarchy that needs to be filled in the draft.
Yeah, their best edge rusher is Jerry Hughes, and he's older than I am.
Well, that's
So
it. So,
yeah.
and you're not the oldest, Brandon, but you're not the youngest. So, no offense, but
Yeah, no, I'm a young man, but I'd be an
yeah.
old football player.
Well, that's it. And the legs go, and they go quick. So, look, if Jerry Hughes can give you kind of similar what he did, albeit less reliant upon him, and you've got a front four of a base defense of Hughes, Ridgway, Rankins, and Grenard. If he can stay healthy, particularly the latter contract year for him, got to go and try and prove something. Then that's a hell of a lot better when we were last year when we were starting with Heinisch, Lopez, Hughes, and kind of Grenard. And I think when you look at the two edge guys of the front four, which Miko will play, that's where we really kind of, if they were going to spend money, I think that was the hope that they would get somebody. But there wasn't really anybody on the market, I don't think, that you would have got. Was there any edge rushers out there that you would have signed, Brandon?
I think Yannick Ngakoue is out there.
Yeah.
I'm missing somebody though. There were two. Yannick Ngakoue is one of, like, I'm just talking about people that we've heard of. Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh man, damn it, I'm gonna be mad about this. Yannick Ngakoue was one, and there was another one. It might be on my show doc within the loop from the other day because I feel like I mentioned it. It just didn't come up on air. But I mean, like, what are we talking about here though? Like, am I upset that they didn't go get Yannick Ngakoue? Like, he's still out there. So like in theory, he could still be had as far as I know. So it's like it's not the end of the world. I think they were. I mean, of course. I mean, Clowney's still out there. I think isn't Frank Clark a free agent?
I believe so, yeah. Because I mean, if you look at like the Draymond Jones deal to Seattle, I mean, was that 51 million from Denver? Probably not. The best one was Zach Allen. Everybody when they set up 47 million to Denver.
And I'm not clamoring for any of these guys, right? I'm just saying these are some of the guys that you've heard of. They're still, I think, out there.
Yeah.
That could potentially make them better. I mentioned Clowney, mentioned Yannick Ngakoue, Bobby Wagner as a, I know we're talking about edge rusher, but as a middle linebacker was somebody that was released. So like there are names out there that you could feel like, hey, should they sign DJ Chark as a wide receiver? I mean, there are guys out there, but
I think the Jaron Reed one.
Those are all the same quality guy, right?
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's it. And shout out to Charles Omenihu for getting a 2-year 16 in KC, by the way. That was a nice deal.
Yeah.
Mugaleta can negotiate. I'll give him that for all his flaws. He can certainly negotiate. But I think the Jaron Reed one, and he's a fit for the scheme. I think that's safe to say. 2 years, $9 million. I would have been involved in that. I think, and then there's other guys that are out there. And look, I think the sign of the market is Ogbo was what he was 6th highest paid defensive end, not including outside linebackers because we're at 4-3 this year. So Larry Ogunjobi getting deals, Zach Allen, all the top. So the market was bare. So I understand why they didn't spend at that position beyond Chase Vinovich. But riddle me this, Brennan. How did DeMarcus Walker that played here for 2 years, get a 3-year, $21 million? Riddle me that.
they in Chicago, right? They
had money to spend. They had to spend the money to meet the minimum requirement rule.
Yeah. And I checked in a little bit on some of the Chicago radio on that, going to the Bears, and they had them on like the afternoon. Their drive time show had them on as a guest, and they were like, wanting to know more about this guy, and I'm like, okay, sure, like he's okay, he's fine. I mean, when he was here, they had to whip him into shape at first. He started training camp,
and they kicked him inside a lot as well.
Yeah, and eventually it kind of came together, and you could see why, he's kind of a semi-interesting player, but to that degree, again, and that's another one where good, good for him, good for him. clearly did something that did enough last year, I have to say, in Tennessee to make the Bears feel like it was worth investing in that.
Yeah.
But man, no, if you were to look at it from a Texan standpoint and say, would you have liked for them to spend their money in this way on DeMarcus Walker?
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah,
much
you ain't
prefer
getting much
strategy.
for that
I
price.
much prefer the strategy that the Texans deployed with DeMarcus Walker than the one that the Bears did, respectfully.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think when you're a free agent as well, I think it'd be a dangerous game to pay money and try and convert them from an outside linebacker as well. The lighter guys, I suppose the only one was Arden Key that you potentially got the Jacksonville's 3-year 20. Well, it's a 2-year
Yeah.
14, I think, that last seven's paper. But yeah, I think they made the decision of, and it's kind of is what it is now. I think right now, and we'll see where we go. But I think Rankins was the definite. But I still think if you want to be competitive in games and make impact in games, you're going to have to find a way to. Interestingly, but I saw Anderson from Alabama said that he's the only team he's spoken to is the Texans at the pro day yesterday. So that's quite an interesting one. I don't know if the stock's not as high on him, and I I'd love for Georgia's number 88 to fault us after some kind of legal wrangling and being involved in the car accident that killed his teammate, and then a brutal pro day. But I don't believe a bad pro day is enough to push teams away to 12. Based on his tape, but I think if you could find a way to get one of those guys plus a quarterback, I don't think it'll happen. This is wishful fantasy utopia stuff right now, but if you could, I think that would really make you feel like this club's pushed on the off season, because you could do with both of them, and regardless of these guys you've signed.
Yeah, you mean so like taking Jalen Carter at 12 if he's there?
Well, yeah, just say he's pissed off a few teams. I know there was character concerns, and obviously, he's not the best guy, or he's certainly made bad choices. But look, he's a young guy, and he's probably already got a couple of million in his tail through NIL. But still, I think Will Anderson's the one that if they don't go quarter, and we've kind of digressed a little bit here, but if they don't go quarterback, then I wouldn't hate it.
Yeah, I cannot imagine a scenario where they don't go quarterback.
No, neither I, and that's why I think you'll have to fall to 12 to get one of them, and I don't. Neither will, I don't think.
And I'll be honest, I know that there's varying opinions and thoughts on the quarterbacks. Like some like them more than others, and so some people just aren't as high on the quarterbacks in this draft, the ones at the top or any of them for that matter, and don't feel like they're worth taking at that spot, especially considering the alternatives defensively, like you mentioned with Will Anderson. But I'm in the camp of actually really liking the quarterbacks. Like I like them both enough to take at that spot. I don't think it would be a reach or a desperation type of thing to go get one just because you need one and one's there. I think that the ones are there are actually good enough to invest in with that pick. So I wouldn't hate having Will Anderson. Don't mistake me here, because Will Anderson is excellent. But if you told me that they passed up the opportunity to draft a franchise quarterback, boy, I'm going to be rooting so hard against that quarterback. Like I'm going to be praying to God that C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, whichever the guy is that's left there at 2 that they would pass up on, I'll be praying to God that guy flames out. And I don't want to wish bad on anybody. I'd like to root for everybody. But since right now I've got the conviction that those guys will be good, I want them to draft them. And if they don't, I'm going to sort of change my mind there and hope that I'm wrong, that I was wrong about them and that they're right. I'll root for them to be right over me, which I wouldn't be, opposed to either. So, but it is a fascinating sort of idea of, okay, well, what if, and I've thought about this, we've done shows about this on Sports Radio 610. What if, despite the fact that Hendon Hooker is in his mid-20s and is coming off of a serious knee injury and didn't really play in a real offense in college, what if they still like what they see from him and they still like his traits and know that they could get him later in the draft and feel like the difference between him as a prospect, and I wouldn't agree with this, but what if they thought this? The difference between him as a prospect and the difference between him and these other guys as a prospect is not that great. It's not
Oh, if
that
it
good.
comes off, you're laughing. And that's why the Seattle had such a run in that sort of vintage draft class, because you find a guy in the third round that nobody really expected to be
Yeah.
good. Same with Dak Prescott. If you
Yep.
find, and they only come along every so often, but they do come along.
Yeah, like I make fun of guys. We get texts, man. I shit you not. We get texts about why aren't y'all talking about Stetson Bennett? What about Clayton Tune, the
Yeah, not very
University of
good.
Michigan quarterback?
Yeah,
And we're like, well, we're not talking about them because they have the number 2 overall pick, and they're not gonna, they're
yeah,
gonna pick the guys that's gonna be available at 2, or one of the guys that makes sense at 2. But it's like, oh well, maybe we should think more. And I mean, like Stetson Bennett, come on now. Like if they were to do that, I'd be really, really shocked. But like, what if they view it as, hey, I could find a just as good quarterback in Hendon Hooker, or nearly as good quarterback prospect in Hendon Hooker, who's got a couple more dents on him, but I could go with that and then give me Will Anderson, and
yeah.
give me Will Anderson at 2, and then give me a wide receiver at 12.
So yeah, I don't think there's a wide receiver worth picking at 12 though. This would be my
or whatever. Like, it could be whatever. They give me a
yeah.
I'm
Best player
I'm not
available.
gonna pay Titus Howard, so give me my tackle at 12. Whatever it is. Now I do like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I actually like Bijan Robinson, and I know a lot of people are like, hey, don't take a running back in the first round.
I wouldn't do it 12, but
I think
if
he's
you
that
could,
dynamic though.
yeah, I wouldn't do it 12. But if you could trade back a number of spots and just say you got a second and a third or something, and you traded back say 10 spots or something like that, and then you got another 2 starters, and you got the best potentially, which I think is safe to say. I think Bijan Robinson probably is the best offensive non-quarterback player in this draft. There's too much doubt about that. But one thing I would say about Jackson Smith and Jigba is just the so when I and I'm only going on last year's film of college because I've watched next to none this year. But against when he's playing in a team with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, he was the best out of the 3.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
for me when I was watching it,
that says a lot. And they and not just you, they would tell you the same thing. They would agree with you.
yeah. But ironically, if you watch him this year in the limited games he played, and he's been injured, so there's a little bit soft tissue injury as well. Don't want another Will Fuller. But I think when you watch them against Harrison Jr., he's not the best player. So it just shows you the factory that rolls through there and different guys. Justin Jefferson wasn't necessarily the best player apart from when he played with Jamar Chase in LSU, but he's come to the next level and never looked back. So there's no Jamar Chase in this, and I think that's the issue. So and nor would a player like that reach to 12 as a transcendent talent at what has now become a really premium spot on your roster, which wasn't 5 years ago, but it's now become really important with the way the game's going.
I love you said transcendent talent though, because that's what I think Bijan Robinson is. The closest thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the reason why I'm for it, because look, there's a philosophy of don't draft a running back high, don't pay a running back. I only subscribe to the back half of that. Like, we can have a conversation about never giving a running back a lucrative extension, like what would be considered a max. I know max extension is not a football term, but like what would be considered a high max lucrative long-term extension, whatever you think that looks like. I could see the argument, but I would also say that with Bijan, I don't think he'll ever be as valuable, or let me put it this way. I don't think a team will be able to get Bijan Robinson at the same value as they will right now in this draft, no matter where he gets picked, 12, 25, 30, whatever it is, whatever contract he signs as a rookie, unless he gets picked he's not going to go number 1 overall, obviously, right? So wherever he gets picked for the money he's going to make, let's say he gets picked at 12. Okay, let's say the Texans take him.
Yeah.
The 12th overall pick, the contract, I could relook this up, but I don't feel like the contract is any more than like $18 million.
Top pick's like 30, isn't it? And then it just kind of goes down.
It goes down. By the time you get to 12, that number gets down to around 18 to $20 million. Let's say on the high end that it's 20. Over the course of his contract. That's
pretty good.
I think right now, do I want to pay him that in 4 years?
No.
We can have that conversation later. I don't think so. But right now, that's about the caliber and cost of player that I feel like he is. And right now would be the best time to get. I'm not saying pay him the second contract. Maybe that's a different discussion. Maybe you franchise tag him if he's still good or something. But right now, whatever team, if it's not the Texans, whatever team it is, they're going to get the best value out of Bijan Robinson for the amount of money that they're going to pay him for where they'll draft him. You know,
Yeah, no, I
by,
think so.
by the time it's time for his next contract, he will be too expensive.
Yeah, and more likely to slow down and be prone to
Yes,
injury. So yeah, I wouldn't
exactly.
hate it, and
Exactly right.
I've toyed with it as well because I think one thing that I have read and watched a little bit is that he got better between his before his penultimate year and his final year in college. He improved,
Yeah.
and I think to the point where he can catch passes, probably as
And they
well as
didn't
some of
use
the
him
wide
enough in
receivers.
that way. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
he probably should have done a lot more than that than they actually did. So, you know, a coach has got to be looking at it. At least I figure a coach and a GM and a scouting staff that's looking about drafting this player got to be thinking, man, if we actually utilize this, if we have an imagination for this, then what could it be? Because they certainly did not nearly enough this past year at Texas. So
yeah. No, absolutely not. And I think that's what you got to remember. I think that It's it's not a premium position and it's been devalued. But watching Derek Henry twice a year, it could be a hell of an asset for you, and you don't necessarily need to have all this other stuff around it for it to be powerful. So, yeah. So we'll try and wrap this up pretty quickly, Brandon. We've kind of gone through it, but I think probably the signing that everybody kind of, and I don't think he'll be thanking his agent, but signing Dalton Schultz for 1 year 9 after coming off a franchise tag at 13, I think his agents quite clearly overshot the market. Didn't perhaps quite fully grasp what the market was for his client. Um, but that potential is the Texans' potential gain because I think it was a spot where, when in a strange kind of season, when Quintoriano kind of came in and actually proven reasonably well that he can block. It's a great class for tight ends. That's clear. Safety, tight ends, cornerbacks, edge rushers. Those are the
yep.
kind of top few positions from what I've seen. This could be a pretty good deal, I think. So hopefully, it's a little bit of good fortune, I think, and the fact that an upper tier tight end, a position of need that you needed, has come to Houston and signed, albeit it's another 1 year deal. But I think that was a pretty good signing, and I think the same with Singletary as well. He's like a
Yep.
proven NFL back, and he can contribute. Ideally, as maybe your secondary guy at worst. And potentially even you can sprinkle him in there as maybe a tertiary guy, and you'd have just say you did take Bijan, you'd have a really good kind of three-headed attack there in the backfield. But I think Dalton Schultz potentially, Brandon, considering the weakness of the wide receiver position, I think he's got a really big chance to potentially be that kind of Owen Daniels kind of secondary pass catching in terms of targets and receptions, if not maybe even your primary.
Yeah, I think just how we were saying earlier, that Sheldon Rankins was the best of those defensive signings. Dalton Schultz will be my counterpoint or my counter example on the offensive side of the ball. I think that's their best signing so far on the offensive side. On the offensive side, clearly has a chance to be their, dare I say, their biggest weapon. We were trying to sort through this with the wide receiver position, like you were just mentioning, the weakness of it. Like, who's going to be their top wide receiver?
It was going to be Nico Collins until they draft somebody, I suppose.
Yeah, so there we go. Who's going to be the leading wide receiver for this team? You just said it's going to be Nico Collins.
Well, I don't think he'll be the leading. I think he'll be the sort of kind of potential to be, but he's not proven he's healthy. He's not consistently done it. He's shown flashes, but never pieced it together, mostly because of injury. It's
a hard question to answer, though.
Oh yeah, big time,
it's a hard
big
question
time.
to answer, and you could make the argument, and I would and will, that Dalton Schultz is their best offensive weapon in the passing game right now. That's kind of the fact of the matter right now. So it'll be real interesting to see how that plays out, what they end up doing at wide receiver. But in terms of the tight end position, like, it just got a lot better from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like it a lot. The point you made earlier though about his market, really interesting to me on how they screwed that. I mean, what's the other way to look at that other than screwing that up? Not like, I don't know what the status of, like, what kind of deal he could have gotten, but 13 million to 9 million in a year where he was actually on a really good offense that was still productive. I do wonder. This might seem a little silly, but I do wonder how much the end of that playoff game factored into the view of him. Like, it would be totally unfair because he's a much better player than just kind of that moment. But I wonder if, like, that lasting impression of him not getting his foot down, sort of cavalier in that playoff game, was like, Maybe I don't want Dalton Schultz, or maybe he isn't worth all the money that we were going to pay him, and that would be silly. But to me, it is an interesting, if it is a coincidence, would be an interesting coincidence that his lasting moment after overall being a really good player, his lasting impression would come, right before he gets less money than what it seemed like he was going to get before.
Yeah.
And clearly what he got on the franchise tag. So
I think
from the Texas standpoint, they did really good with it.
In a non-premium position in a soft market with a really burgeoning rookie class, it's perhaps a little bit overpay when you look at the total context of it. But is he better than Jordan Aikens? Yeah. So this team's taking another stride forward at another position. So I like it.
$9 million.
That's all right.
It's all right. I mean, you could do worse than that.
I don't think it's official yet, is it, that one? I've not seen any details in the contract.
No. I mean, we get these emails that confirm them later, days after they're reported.
Yeah.
Those emails saying, we've signed so-and-so. And we have not. Matter of fact, I can check my email now just to be sure, because I've been talking to you just to be sure. No, it doesn't look like we've gotten anything like that.
And while we've been talking here, I've seen Aaron Wilson's reported that Texans have signed former Steelers kickoff return or wide receiver kick returner Steven Sims Jr. So investment in special teams while we've been sitting here. So I think Luke is good. I think is he going to be better than DeAndre Carter was the last one who was returning. Oh, Trayvon Smith, didn't he? He got a decent deal in Denver, so that's a replacement for that at a lower, assuming a lower cap hit. So then what he got. So be it. So I think I suppose we've got the backup center to talk about. I suppose as well, haven't we? Really? Yeah. That's a position that looks a little bit light, and I think Dieter might be it. I don't in the same way that they brought back Derek Rivers for reasons unbeknown to anybody that's watched this team play. I don't know why they brought back Scott Quisenberry, because it just sometimes it's just not, you don't have to bring somebody back in the fear of not signing anybody, but that's what they did. And look, Dieter's obviously there because they've not, and I thought maybe, I don't know what the outs in the Quisenberry deal is, and maybe I thought that would lead to potentially a release, but that will depend on the undrafted free agent class and if they do find the centre, of which there are reportedly only sort of 2 or 3 candidates that people think have got the capacity to play immediately. So that's a little bit of concern, I think.
Yeah, it's been a concern, and it remains a concern. But like I said, it's been a concern for a little while now, ever since. I mean, I think I'd even go back to bringing Justin Britt back. Like the fact that was their main plan.
Well, I don't know about that one.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like that. Well, no. What I'm saying is,
I know.
When they brought him back last year.
Oh yeah, I know. But that sort of tier of player, I think who was the guy they got for Green Bay the year before, and he was cooked.
Lane.
Yeah. So Lade Taylor, was it Lade Taylor?
That's what I'm sorry.
Lade Taylor. I wish you said I'd take Lade Johnson even at his age. He's just got a new deal. But
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Lade Taylor, the Marcus Cannon, AJ Cann, Justin Britt. Like have they not learned their lesson of don't sign guys who just probably don't give you the movement to do it? That was a disaster last year, Justin Britt. The fact they took him till the week before free agency do it, then that was a bit of an indictment, I think, when it released. I was only joking.
But the point there is that it's just been a long-standing issue. A long-standing issue that has not been adequately addressed. No way you slice it. So it's something that I've been big on the entire offseason. I said that it was their biggest need because, I just threw quarterback away because, obviously, we don't have to have a conversation about how important quarterback is. So I, put quarterback at 5th, just to be cute, and said, hey, the biggest need is center. Let's if we were to do a top 5, let's work our way down and just start at quarterback, make that 5th. But you really need a center. You know what I mean? And they have not done it. And they need to do it, and it makes you feel like that's something that they could really address in the draft. And, there is a slight chance that they see something in this Michael Dieter from Miami that just the rest of the world that just has not seen. Maybe that's the case, and I would be shocked if that is, but they got to do something, it feels like. And I'll be really watchful for what their approach is in the draft. Of course, on the air, I was real I thought, while not the best option is in terms of like the quality of player, I thought Jeff Brendel from the San Francisco 49ers just made sense as a guy who was a free agent and played much better than what was expected of him last year. He had been a career backup until last year and played well. And I thought probably outpriced himself out of the 49ers market and priced himself in to the Texans market. I was wrong about that. The 49ers brought him back, and my understanding is there wasn't much of a back and forth there with Brendel,
Yeah.
of him wanting to come here because he wanted to stay there, and they wanted to keep him. So I was hoping for that, because I thought that would be a reasonable deal that they could make and still be an upgrade while not necessarily being one of these home run hidden moves, something that was going to wow people and knock people's socks off or anything like that. But yeah, the Michael Dieter leaves a lot to be desired there. Him and Scott Quinn, and with Quesenberry, I figure he just comes back as a backup. Like, if you tell me Scott Quesenberry is one of your backups, I can live with that. It's when you insert him into the, as one of your starting offensive linemen and he starts for 15 games or 16 games, 17 games, however many games he started. I think it was 16. Yeah, I mean, that is what concerns me. If he's a depth piece, I can live with it. He's on a practice squad, I can live with it or whatever,
Yeah.
But that can't be your starting center, and your only options can't be him and somebody that couldn't even start for Miami's offensive line last year. So
Yeah.
I didn't even have an offensive snap from what I saw. So I mean, they got to do something. They got to do something.
Well, what I couldn't really get my head around was when 4 off seasons ago, and this is what in my head when I saw some of the center contracts come through. When in 2019 you gave Nick Martin 18 million up front, 33 over 3. Okay, and I know it was different people here then, and it was a strange thing to do at the time,
Yes.
and everybody kind of thought it was pretty crazy. But within that context, and it probably shows you where we were and where we've got to. But was the Garrett Bradbury, which is effectively just a 1 year 5.25. The Bradley Bozeman, I don't think necessarily he's probably a scheme fit actually, Bozeman, but coming from, he was previously Baltimore, wasn't he? But anyway, just if you take the Brendel thing, which I think that only works out as a 1 year 5, so effectively committing to a 1 year 5 year deal. Or 16 up front and 15 up front in paper over 3 and 4 years respectively. Like, if they weren't in that market versus what they're in, I think they might regret that. And there is times when I think you have to invest a little bit more than you probably feel comfortable with, and I think that was one of them. But we'll see. Hopefully, we address that in the draft, Brandon, because we're going to have to.
Yeah, I don't see what else the other options are now. Now that they didn't do it in free agency, and to be clear, I was hoping they would do it in free agency. This is one of the things that I was hoping wouldn't be a thing they'd have to address in the draft. Yeah. At least have to address in the draft. If they saw an opportunity, a player that they liked for the value that they could get them, would have been opposed to it. But I'd much rather they go the veteran route and have an established center or something closer to it, and have done that. And again, with the Brendel thing that that we talked about. I don't know if it was more so them not being in the market for him, is him not being in the market with them. Like him just, hey, I'll take whatever San Francisco gives me. And I don't know what they offered him with the tech, or if he even got that far. But my understanding is that he wanted to be in San Francisco. So which, I mean, who wouldn't want to play for the 49ers given what they got going on right now? Versus what is basically an experiment here with the Texans. So I get that. But I mean, there's more guys out there you'd like to see them just. I don't want to say be more aggressive because without knowing exactly how aggressive they were for sure. But
you never know.
You would like to see better results, I guess is the best way to put it, and hopefully now the best way to do that is in the draft somehow.
Yeah, and it's designed chaos. I think in some ways that the league are quite happy with refs being objectively wrong and bad at times, because it creates an industry around it. And I think free agency is designed chaos, and the depiction of Caserio talking about doing deals on text pretty quickly within the space of an hour is kind of, I think it lends itself well to that. So final bit, and then we'll wrap it up with a touch on the draft. But Perryman, Denzel Perryman was a good player. Tore his hamstring off the bone when he was in. The Chargers. Might have still been in San Diego at that point, who knows. Didn't really do it for the the Raiders. Littleton's the same, great year. Got himself paid also in well, it might be in Oakland, might be in LA. Stop moving these teams. I think that's one thing you need to learn. But anyway, he's then been in Carolina next year. I think Perryman or sorry, Littleton gives you more than Perryman for me, because I think, we moved on for a guy from like Bernardrick McKinney as he got older because he came less effective. I see Perryman's career trajectory going that way as well. Littleton at least is a bit better in space mover. Cody Stutes told me he far prefer Perryman on Twitter. But what's your thought on those two guys? And the silver lining might be Kirksey might be gone, and that'll be the best off-season move for me, because I'm sick to death of watching that guy play ball. But anyway, all respect to the man, but not the player.
Yeah, well, I would say that's my takeaway. The last bit of what you said there. Yeah. I think before, without parsing through, Perryman and like the fact that it's not going to be, and I like Christian Kirksey a lot as well, but do you feel like he's probably going to be a cap casualty more than likely, or somebody that's not going to survive through camp at the very least? So Littleton, Perryman, either way it goes, it's a new day. It's a new day here at the at that linebacker position specifically. I think it's okay. Like, the difference, I would say, like with Bernardrick McKinney, I mean, he was just really a throwback. Like, I don't think Perryman is like that in terms of the way Bernardrick McKinney was. Just,
not quite.
He was like a transformer out there. Like, and you're like, man, the linebackers just don't look like that anymore, man. It's just a different game. And you saw how things faded out for him. Didn't even really last very long in Miami after that trade. So I think this is good. They had to do it, and to me, like I right now, without watching them play and seeing how it's going to all come together, how they're going to all play together, I just look at it as what it signals and what it means and what they're trying to do. And that's the big thing. That's why I cling to the end there, when you're like, hey, it just means Christian Kirksey wasn't likely out of here. Well, then, you bring in Denzel Perryman and you bring in Corey Littleton, more than likely because you're moving in a different direction. Like, Christian Kirksey now would be redundant, and not in a good way, like not in a depth kind of way. Yeah. So that's my takeaway from it, is that it's a new day, and I think that these are guys that, again, I'm not like about to throw a party about it. Like, yeah, man, and the Denzel Perryman's been in the works for a while, so it's been like the worst kept secret over here in Houston media that they were working on this deal with Denzel Perryman. It's like,
and not big money either, really. I mean, he's not really neither's contract signals instant starter, and I think actually they're both on less money APY than they signed Kirksey to. But hey,
well, I don't know why it took so long, man. We've been hearing about this for weeks, it feels like. But So I mean, that's how you feel. It's like, okay, they're just. They feel like this is at the very least a slight upgrade, and you hope that it is. They needed it, and so it almost brings me back to center as the one where I'm like, man, if there's a gripe, and it's not really a gripe because they can still do it, but if there is a gripe, it's like, okay, well, they did a really good job at addressing a lot of the key positions of need, except this one, and linebacker would be one of the ones you feel got to at least feel better about.
Yeah, I think there's definitely sort of, in the same way that Hassan Ridgway or Chase Vinovich or, Noah Brown or Robert Woods or whatever, you can put them out there, and they don't. I don't think if you feel like they're going to let you down. And I think we've probably been in that position far too often. And when we highlighted the example of the defensive tackles, Brandon Bean more than. So anyway, I was sitting in a bar in Brooklyn, Brandon. It was my birthday. I was in this bar in Brooklyn. And it comes up on the television. The Panthers have traded to the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
And it was what everybody expected. Well, you just knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, where was I? Because I feel like I was at a bar too, because I had to stop whatever I was doing and tend to it. But yeah, man, it's good for them, because I the one thing that's been confirmed to me that I thought even at the time when the Texans won that last game was like, man, even if they don't want the quarterback, even if they don't know which quarterback they want, they're going to regret not being in this position.
Imagine getting DJ Moore.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude. Yeah. TJ Moore. Like, yeah, they could have gotten DJ. I didn't even think about it like that. That's another point. Yeah. Because I mean that would obviously be instantly their best receiver
So
by a
what was it?
mile.
Two. It was two first, 2 seconds, and
And
effectively a leading wide receiver, or
yep, that's right. That's exactly it. So it's like, oh man. So you mean that's what we could you mean the Texans could have either gotten their quarterback, which is what I probably would have preferred, but as a consolation prize, they could have gotten that. Yeah. And still in a position to I don't know, man. It's all of that, okay, that you could have gotten, and then all of the assets that you already had, like, oh man, you just feel like you're set up. So good for them. It's a really cool thing to be able to control the draft, control narratives, play mind games with the media and with the public, and maybe even with the other teams if they can't see through it. I think that's a lot of what's happening now. Posturing. Nobody really knows. I don't
yeah,
think who the Panthers want. So, well, somebody knows, but I don't think the public really knows. And there is a slight chance, I don't believe it, but the slightest chance that the Panthers don't know, which would be hilarious. That would be hilarious if they just traded up to the number one overall pick just for the opportunity to pick the first guy and not necessarily knowing which guy they want. I don't believe that's the case, but that would be hilarious. That would be a very, very bold and audacious move.
yeah,
So, but either way, man, it's a position that you prefer to be in. Picking two is nice. It's cool. I think it's going to work out for the Texans more than likely. Well, more than likely, it's probably not. More than likely, it actually doesn't. Funny enough, the odds
well,
actually
yeah,
probably say it doesn't. But I like the prospects and what they could do there. But it's no question that having that number one overall pick is better. Being in the Bears position that they were in is better, and now being in the position that the Panthers are in is better. And look, I said, look, the Texans, I'm fine with them not trading up to the number one overall pick. I just hope that they really, really like whichever quarterback they land with, because if you have that kind of conviction, or even
yeah,
even if it's Will Anderson, like I just hope that they like that player, because there's nothing like just being able to say, hey, I'm going to dictate this. I'm going to dictate who is the best, like who is the number one quarterback, who is the number one player. Or I'm going to be in that position where I can be the Bears and trade the number one overall pick, or
yeah,
I can be the Panthers and try to flip it again. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. But I
yeah.
could be the Panthers and try to flip it again. Maybe I didn't really want it. I just wanted to get somebody to pay more than I paid for it. Just and all the things that you can kind of just do with your imagination with what you can do with the number one overall pick. It's just way more fun and interesting. So,
Yeah,
but
it's like the
hopefully the
Texans.
scoring part works out.
Yeah, the Texans choice reminds me, and it's on one of the Netflix comedy specials where there's like a series of comedians in a club. I think it's in LA, and they all do like their best material for sort of 20 minutes or so. And there's an American comedian, a black guy, and I can't remember his name, and he's really funny. And he's not like a big superstar, I don't think, anyway, from my knowledge. But anyway, he does the sketch where he goes in and he says, "How And there's always that quote. What was it? What men love the women that love them the most." And he does
Yeah.
a sketch where he goes up in a club and he says how most men find their partners is they'll go up and say to a group of women, "Which one of you likes me the best? Because I like you the same." And it's a bit like that's the kind of choice that the Texans are kind of faced with here. Like, you're just going to get what you're given and reciprocate because you have to. You've got no choice. We don't control the draft. If we controlled the draft, would be a female. Now that we're second and we're the male in this choosing of relationships here of who we're going to try and spend the next 5 years of our football life together. So we don't get the free choice anymore. But
and to be clear too on how I feel about that, I'm not saying, because I feel like there's a lot of pushback on this. Okay,
yeah,
on like, hey, well, if the Panthers take the quarterback that you want, that you really, really want, don't just reach for the other guy just because he's there and you feel like you have to. I agree with that. Don't just pick the other quarterback because I like him, because you like him, or because Texans Twitter likes him, or because it would be the popular thing to do, and it would undoubtedly create a certain level of buzz, no matter how good Bryce Young or CJ Stroud's going to be. Before they ever step foot on the football field, it's going to create an energy and a buzz around this team and around this franchise that I think is worth considering. But don't do it if you don't believe what I
So,
believe. Okay, so
yeah,
I truly want to get that across. Like, I'm not saying that that's something that they feel like they've got to do. I
yeah,
just hope that they truly agree with me, that they
yeah.
truly think that the guy is actually good. And if they don't freaking do it, man. Don't do it.
Yeah.
So like I don't want them to feel like their hand is forced, like, oh, I just got to take this quarterback that's here. I hope they don't view it that way, even though that is what it is. Like, you're just the math of it, you're taking the second guy. But I hope they truly believe in the second guy if they take him, and if they don't, take somebody else. Take somebody else.
Yeah. I'm gonna find that sketch of the comedian. I'm gonna put it on Twitter after
Yeah,
this when
yeah,
I
yeah.
can
I'll
find
check
it.
it out. I'll check it out.
And that's the situation the Texans are in. But imagine this. So if you're Caserio, he desperately wanted to trade at that spot that where he picked Stingley, didn't get the chance. You've got to assume because he was very public about it. Picture this scene, Brandon. Miller outdoor draft party in the theater in Herman Park. It is, isn't it? Yeah, Herman Park. And yeah, and everybody's there, anticipation, and trades out, and he trades it again the 12th. So just say in a world where he's not convinced with the quarterbacks, and actually he'll take one of these guys, a Hendon Hooker or whoever, in the second or third round. And then you come with a bevy of picks all second, third, and fourth round because you've traded out, and then you use all the rest of your picks to trade up in that sort of top 100, 150 players, and say you come out with 8 or 9 draft picks, but all of them are fifth round and above, right? But that's based on you've traded out of those 2 top assets. How do you think people would feel about it?
Honestly, I think if they, as long as they get a quarterback, okay, and there will be, I think, a healthy level of disappointment if it's not one of those 2 guys. But if they get a quarterback, say it's Hendon Hooker, I think that there is some credibility built in with Demeco Ryans. But with that and some excitement, I should say excitement more than anything. It would be a really interesting play by Nick Caserio, though. I don't know if he can, and I'm not saying that he's not inclined to do exactly what you described. He might even prefer it. And if he does, he should do it. He should stick to his conviction. But it'll be interesting because, hey, man, think what you want. Like, his job's on the line, man. His job's on the line. I'm not saying like this year per se, but just as an idea, we are way past the honeymoon phase. So it would just be interesting. The reaction at the theater, at Miller Outdoor Theater, would be, I think it would be really interesting. You probably get a lot of mixed emotions because you know this from dealing with fans on Twitter and different places where you interact, that you've got the extremes, and this is where Texans fans are no different. But you've got the extreme optimistic fan that's just gonna just go with whatever it is and believe in whatever the team does. And those also tend to be the fans I feel like that don't do as much research and don't necessarily understand the things as well. Like you're much more likely to be pessimistic the more that you know and the more that you dig into it. But you got a lot of people that just watch the games and root for the team. Okay, they don't necessarily follow every storyline, every rumor, every transaction. They watch the games, they root for the team. They check out the draft, they check out training camp, listen to the radio a little bit, but they just watch the games for the most part and root for the team.
Yeah.
But you're also going to have that other side that's like knee deep into this has been a shit show for years now, man. When are we going to get this together? And what kind of plan is this? So it'll be interesting to see how those different dynamics.
Yeah, there are exceptions, but I always think the people who are the most vocal are not the ones that are there. It's never. I think you've got a few infamous types and characters, and then you've got people that I don't believe that are real people. Because how can you be commenting on every single thing that's ever been written about the team first every time? But anyway, as I've been a lot busier in my professional life, and I've not had any time or as much time as I would like to contribute to this, Brandon, or my knowledge of these phrases to be in depth. I've really found that I've removed myself from that world, and actually I see no value in it as a guy who's not paid to do this. I only did it because a bit of extra time. Don't have it anymore. But it's weird. You kind of remove yourself from it and you see it a little bit more objectively. And as long as I live, I hope I never get in a Twitter spat with anybody ever again, because it just seems royally pointless now at this stage of my life. However, I think the draft's going to be hellishly exciting. I think that we've got a chance. Caserio's got a chance to define his career as a GM. He's got a chance to define this franchise for the next 5 years. Of it, because I think if he was to trade back, a lot and then just amass a broad church of, top 100 picks, it would give this roster a really sound foundation. But then that just puts all the pressure on next year to find the guy. Now, you can't play what's next year. I'd take a guy 2 years in a row before I play the risk of not taking a guy this year in favour of a future potential class that you don't even know. Some might be selling insurance in 3 years' time. So, there's a lot of unknowns, but this is the point now. We've finally come to a point, I think, where we're at a crossroads, because it's forward in success, or it's going to be slightly better than what we've seen, but mediocrity. So, here's hoping.
Yeah. Sense of urgency now, man. Sense of urgency, and that's not to say that, hey, Texans are going to win the AFC South next year. But they need to start looking like the team that eventually will,
Yeah,
and
that's the key.
And you need to be getting the players. You need to be getting the players that are going to be a part of that. Whether that's 5 guys, whether that's 11 or 12 guys, it needs to be something that people can believe in, and it needs to produce early, and it needs to produce right away. I think about going into the season. I know we're talking about free agency and the draft, but man, I think so often on Derek Stingley Jr. and Kenyon Green as guys who have upside, but still got to prove it, man.
Yeah.
Like you or I cannot sit here and definitively say that they hit on those picks right now.
No, and yeah,
can't call them busts after 1 year, because that would be presumptuous.
Kenyon Green was borderline at times last year, and I think and he knows.
No. He had a bad rookie year. Period.
I think he played okay in was it the last game of the year? I think he played all right.
He was excellent in that last game of the year, which out of all the games to be good in, he was very good in the last game of the year. But overall, he did not have a good rookie year. But we can't say one way or the other. Like the way you can say Sauce Gardner at 4, they hit on that pick.
Good year. Yeah.
He's an all. If he's an all pro his first year, you hit on that pick. Now, if he's not an all pro his first year, that doesn't mean that you didn't. But the way you got to feel with Derek Stingley Jr. not playing the whole season because of injury, and that being his history already, and the way you got to feel about Kenyon Green between performance, injury, conditioning, and everything, those guys got something to prove this year, and I hope they do it. I'm rooting for them to do it, but you're already going into this year with your second year guys that were your first round picks last year. They got something to prove.
Yeah.
On top of whatever you draft this year, just got something to prove. So it's cutting time.
And you could have traded out of 3 and got Garrett Wilson, as well. That was another option. Which they were rumored to be enamored with, when we got close to draft.
There were a lot of good players that went between Derek Stingley and Kenyon Green that they could have had, or the fact that they traded back to get Kenyon Green and could have had one of the players that got picked there. Like, I know Jordan Davis didn't have a huge year, but I wouldn't mind having Jordan Davis on this team. It'd make you feel a little bit differently about what the needs are, I feel like, or what the future looks like at that position. So, but now, of course, that would still mean more than likely that you'd have an issue at left guard unless you did something different there at, in free agency or whatever. But yeah, because that was a desperate need at the time. But this is a crucial point in franchise history, both for the young players that they already have, and obviously for the ones that they're about to pick, and for Nick Caserio.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, right. Well, thank you very much, mate, for your time. It's now 6:30 here on a Friday, so I think I'm going to crack a cold one, and I've really enjoyed doing this, mate. So thank you again. You're the first guest we've ever had on back-to-back episodes now, I think, just because we've not done so long. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was about 6 weeks in between them, but there you go. They've got them in.
That's fine. This is Laramie Tunsil status, man. I did it twice.
That's it. You did it twice. Yeah.
First one to do it twice.
Yeah.
Just call me Tunsil. Call me Tunsil, man.
So if
That's
any,
all right.
and if anybody's wanting to join us on a more regular basis this year, because it's going to be tough for me to try and get everybody scheduled in a weekly basis, do shout out and reach out if you'd like to come and join and carry a bit of the load so we can keep this going. Because I am struggling to keep my head above water professionally and do this at the same time is not easy. So, but it's been great, and Brandon, thank you again, top guy, and really appreciate you coming along. No more Rex Burkhead, no more Jalen Reeves, Baben, or what the fuck his name is. No more Royce Freeman. No more Neville Hewitt. No more Kevin Pierre-Lewis. Justin
Right
Bridwell, we never
away.
really seen him. No more Jeff Driscoll.
Oh God,
Blake
goodness.
Cashman, okay, he wasn't the worst. And I'd bring back Rashad Green on a final note because I think he could still give you something as a fourth or fifth rusher on it because I think he did some
Oh,
things at times. Yeah,
Rasheem Green.
yeah, I'd
Yeah,
bring him back.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I'd bring him back.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
All right.
I think we're
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
We're
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's brighter days ahead, man. I can at the
absolutely.
very least say that. I think that they've again made several upgrades and things are looking up.
Yeah,
And let's get this draft going. See what this quarterback
yeah.
situation is going to look like. See what kind of weapons they're going to add. I already feel a lot better about the defense. Let's see, man. Especially with Demeco coaching it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
things are looking up at least in late March. We'll see how we feel about it come September.
Yeah. I'm going to go and finish Tulsa King tonight. I've only watched the first 3 or 4 episodes of that. Have you got any recommendations?
I have not watched Tulsa King, but that's one to check out. So the shows that I watch right now are Snowfall.
Okay.
It's on FX, and then the other one that I've been binging lately. It's an older show. Well, I'm not gonna say older show. It came out 2 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But Godfather of Harlem, with Forrest Whitaker.
Oh
I
yeah, I've seen about 4 or 5 episodes. That's good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, I've been trying to watch that show for years and just had not gotten around to it.
Mm.
And somehow I caught some free time and was gonna watch something, and I tried it and didn't like it, and then came across Godfather of Harlem. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this again.
Yeah.
Because I tried it and just didn't have time, and now I'm on it, man. I like there was one day, it might have been a week ago now, where it got away from me, man. Like I got a little bit unproductive, and it was almost like college, man, where you like, find yourself in a hole somewhere, binging something or doing something that you have no business doing. And next thing you know, you skip class and whatever
Yeah.
else you're supposed to do. So right now for me, it's Snowfall, Godfather of Harlem. What else am I on?
I've
Those are
not
probably
watched. I've not watched the new series of Yellowstone yet, so I need to do that.
Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Did I watch? I so I stopped on Yellowstone toward the end because it started to get really crazy. I don't know where everybody's at with it or where you are with it, but some of the storylines for me started to get
Mm.
really wonky. Even though I like the characters and I like what the show is about. So I'm a Yellowstone guy too. And I think I started on this new season but didn't finish it.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah. I thought the
yeah.
fourth one kind of ended a bit sort of, always that it sort of thing versus season 3, which is probably the best one out of the first 3. But
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
but yeah, no, I think the new Guy Ritchie film, Operation something, that's going to be one to watch. I think so.
Yeah, I haven't
That's got
checked that
Jason
out.
Statham in it. I think that's just come out or is coming out. Operation Fortune. Somebody said that to me the day I watched that. So there's plenty to keep you if you want to break from football before this draft.
Yeah.
It'll come around hell of a quick. What we've been sitting away
Yeah.
now, 24. So we're exactly a month pretty much away, aren't we?
Yeah.
So
I was gonna
um,
say I've probably been to the movies more lately than I have in a while because I do the Marvel movies.
right.
And so I saw Quantumania, and then I saw Cocaine Bear. Like
All right.
back,
Yeah. Is that good?
it's like bad good. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Like spoof almost. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's actually awful, but in a good way. So yeah, that's probably how I would describe that one. I feel like I'm missing one. I'm definitely missing one. Quantumania, Cocaine Bear, and I watched something else now that I'm forgetting about.
Can't be that
Uh,
memorable then if you can't go.
yeah. Maybe not.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's plenty of stuff to get into to distract yourself if you need to get
Yeah.
away.
That's
Yeah,
it.
man.
No, that exactly. Well, enjoy this next month, because after that it's pretty quick back in rookie mini camp, and football comes around really quick. So we'll try and do 1 or 2 shows just with some of the guys we've had in the last couple of years talking draft prospects. As I said, I know nothing at this stage, so I'll be watching along the same as everybody else. And then I'll definitely dig into the prospects post draft for a bit and get an idea of what I think might happen, time permitting. But Brandon, thanks very much. Have a good Friday. Enjoy the build up to the draft. We'll be in touch.
That's for sure.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It all comes out in some way, or it's certainly leaked because people want it to be leaked. But who knows? I think it's going to be exciting. I've taken the Friday off work. Going to get ready for the draft, get a good setup. We've got a draft beer in the house. We're going to get some good food, and we're probably going to need some extra support to stay up. But we're 1 a.m. by the time the first pick goes, so it's a marathon, not a sprint. You've got to be committed to doing it, but really looking forward to it. Brandon, thank you, mate. Appreciate you as always. And thanks again for listening to the Turn Up for What podcast.